And right when we get started here, Kevin, I'll just remind you because I still keep seeing comments in the section. If you can, just boost that volume, lean in, whatever it's got to take, because for some reason people still aren't hearing it completely clearly. I hear you clearly on my side, but for some reason it doesn't. It's not outputting that way when we put it up on YouTube. But to those that are just joining in, we are recording this Truth Bomb Riff conversation on Tuesday, February 27th at approximately 12:30 p.m. my time. And I think we're going to start off with you leading the direction because you reached out to me to request that we should do a Truth Bomb on the service member who I want to say self-immolation is what you described it as, and I think that's the appropriate term. But he set himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy yesterday, and he was a 25-year-old serviceman who I believe is in critical condition. Aaron Bushnell, I believe is his name. I don't know much other than I saw out of the corner of my eye. There wasn't a lot of coverage. You know, it was interesting. I saw this pop up just briefly on some of my feeds, but I didn't see it, and I still haven't seen it in mainstream media. I mean, I guess I saw just right before I hit record. I think Time Magazine. I had a couple, but it wasn't like on the front page of the New York Times in the way I normally get mainstream media, for example. So it still was. It kind of surprised me yesterday. I got it out of the corner of my eye, and I was like, "Okay, what is that?" And then I was about to dig into it, and then I went on to other things like I normally do. But obviously, it caught your attention a very big way, and here we are. Let's discuss.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Patrick. And at the risk of blowing people out here in terms of the sound, I have my volume all the way up. So I'm going to talk in a normal voice because it sounds very loud to me. And if I yell on top of that, then we're going to have an audio that, people can't turn down enough, relative to what you are going to sound like.
I
So
think it sounds
hopefully,
good when you're close to the screen.
hopefully this is good enough for people to follow without distraction. And so, yeah, the reason why I want to talk about the self-immolation of Aaron Bushnell is because it is at the heart of the challenge that we have in getting the $70 trillion truth told.
Interesting.
The reason why people don't know the $70 trillion truth that you have spent over 13 years and millions of dollars to uncover is
Last six
because
specifically, but the journey itself was 13 years,
yes,
from me getting blown up to me starting to pull the threads and me going,
yes,
what's going on? Yeah,
it,
but to your point, absolutely.
absolutely, that you've spent a good deal of your mature professional life
Yes.
focused on this, and an awful lot of money focused on this. The reason why people don't know is because we are the powers that be don't want them to know. Powers that be hide this information from them by distracting them with a variety of narratives that explain and cover up and obscure the con game that they've played on America.
Absolutely.
And
Amen to that, brother.
what Aaron Bushnell did is reflects the magnitude of the truth once you find out. So, who is Aaron Bushnell? Aaron Bushnell is a 25-year-old white male from San Antonio, Texas, who volunteered to join the United States Air Force and serve his country. Right. And and I don't know a lot about his story. You could be rest assured the powers that be will do everything they can to destroy him so that we don't take the truth of what he is, why he did this, and what he did. But I can say this much. I think his words speak for themselves.
Or
So
his
I'm going to read
actions.
you, huh?
Oh, sorry. You're going into his words, but I was going to say his actions speak plenty as
Well,
well.
well, we have to understand his words. When someone does something and they leave a note, right? It helps us to understand why they did what they did. And we do
Sure.
this in the big and we do this in the small. There's a reason why we study Mein Kampf, right? We need to
Absolutely.
understand why Hitler did what he did.
Yep.
Well, Aaron is not Hitler, but the idea is what he did has only been done a few times in modern human history, right? Right. And each time was significant, right? And so why did he do it? And so this is his last Facebook post. Okay. And it says, many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery or the Jim Crow South or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is, you're doing it right now. That was his last Facebook
That's
post.
incredibly powerful.
And then he went and stood in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., and he recorded a video. And this is what he said. My name is Aaron Bushnell. I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide, he said. I am about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal. That's his last statement. Then on video, he poured lighter fluid or whatever over his body and lit himself aflame. And while he was burning to death, all he was screaming was, free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine. When the first responders got there, and all this is on tape, available to you if you want to go see it, they were trying to get him to lay down so that they could throw the. Somehow this guy stood while he was burning to death, far longer than you, and as long as he could speak, he was saying free Palestine, and then he fell over, and he's dead. He died. He didn't die immediately. So think about the magnitude of that kind of death.
When did he die, by the way? Because the last thing I saw was, again, it was just in passing. I haven't done the deep dive on it. It said that he was in critical condition. The last headline that I saw right before I pressed, I sent this to you.
Oh no, he's been confirmed that he died. I mean, he died some hours later, maybe the next day later, that kind of thing. But
Didn't it just happen yesterday?
I don't have the
I
date.
thought it said 17 hours ago. Maybe it was.
I don't have the date, but he rest assured, he has died. It is confirmed that he has died.
I'm not questioning that. I just
it
thought
took him
that
a
was
while. It took him a while to die. Okay, so why is all this significant? And I know you've not wanted to talk about what's happening in Gaza.
It's not that I don't want to talk about it. I want to talk about it, but I, like we've talked off camera. To me, this is a conversation that, from where I'm standing from, because I'm Jewish, is extremely difficult, and especially because I'm a progressive person on many levels. That you know, and we're going to talk about this because we have, now that we've entered this doorway, we have to talk about it. But I'm going to let you talk first, and then I'll offer whatever I have to offer. But yeah, I mean, for an American Jewish person who believes in the integrity of law and democracy, as an American, pretty much at the apex of everything that I am, yeah, I'm a little bit distraught, particularly when I see the Star of David emulating the swastika that I'm seeing now appear all over. Okay. So yeah, it's very difficult for me to just not want to get engaged with the full spectrum of the dialogue. But at the same time, I understand that, okay, I'll say this. So one of my most important images to me was during the Tet Offensive, I think it was.
Yes.
1972, when I saw the Buddhist monks lighting themselves on fire. That ended up on the front page, excuse me, the cover of, for example, one of my favorite bands of all time, Rage Against the Machine. Oh yeah, that had an impact. And then many years ago, was it 2011? When the merchant in Tunisia lit himself on fire to domino the Arab Spring.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with
this is one of those moments.
Yeah.
This is okay, so let me give you my come from. As a U.S. military, a U.S. Army veteran, as a person like Aaron, who volunteered to serve his country, as a person like Aaron, who had to grip, who was training, in their training, had to resolve a fundamental question. Under what circumstances would I kill or allow myself to be killed? Right? Because once the balloon goes up, it's not the time to answer that question. You got to know under what circumstances would you kill or allow yourself to be killed, sacrifice your life. Okay. And Aaron went through that, right? He made those choices. I don't know what his choices were in terms of under what circumstances would he kill or be killed. Right? I know my choice was based on the idea that I would do this to defend my way of life, the way of life that has given me everything that I have, right? In defense of my country. Okay. But what we've experienced, so in between my service, which was from November 1983 to November 1987, under the Reagan administration, and Aaron Bushnell's service, right, which he ended just yesterday, right? What has happened to our voluntary military? U.S. foreign policy has changed our voluntary military into a force of people who have come together to defend the American way of life, and have reduced them to modern day Pinkertons.
What was that last word?
Modern day Pinkertons.
Yeah, you're talking about the guys back during the union busting era that were hired by the robber barons. I think that's a really apt comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't, ever since the Soviet Union stood down, there was no country on this earth who could threaten the sovereignty of the United States. But we've used our military in combat all over this globe, virtually every year since the Soviet Union stood down. And why?
That's true.
Who benefited from it, right? Okay. Well, when I look at it and I notice that we never seem to win anymore, right? How many conflicts? We never seem to win anymore.
They're not designed to win.
Yeah, well, okay, we can get into that, but here's the reality of the story: is we're always told,
and also who's winning is the question, which is really
okay. This is me laying out the case, right? What I'm trying to say here is that we're told all these lies, all these stories for why we should sacrifice, why we should take people who volunteered to serve their country and use them to sacrifice everything, right? Right? We've always been given an honorable story, when the truth of the matter is that the only people who benefits, whether you win or lose a war, is the arms dealers.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we spent 20 years in Afghanistan.
That's right.
And we spent hundreds of billions of dollars standing up 400,000 members of an Afghan army, who, before the weekend ended, after we left, turned over everything to the Taliban.
That's right.
Okay, you didn't see just an explosive amount of protests from the powers that be in the United States over that reality, that our hundreds of billions of dollars worth of arms and training are now in the hands of the Taliban. You know why? Because Lockheed Martin and all the rest of the military industrial complex already got paid.
That's right.
Right. So the Taliban could stay. They ran Afghanistan beforehand. They ran Afghanistan after. And the only people who got rich is the uber billionaires who own the military industrial complex, i.e. BlackRock, State Street, the usual suspects, right? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. What we look at NATO expansion. Look at NATO expansion. Why would NATO expand all the way across Europe? Because every time they add a new country, they spend tens of billions of dollars modernizing that country's military with NATO-grade weapons. Okay, it's economics.
Which means it's our economy, I suppose, is what you're getting
at. Yeah. Oh, yes, it's economics.
That's
right. But this is how we use our military.
Right.
So when I say that we've converted honorable people, Aaron comes from San Antonio, Texas. okay? Whatever you want to think about Texas, most people would agree that if patriotism still exists in this country, it's in places like Texas.
Absolutely.
This is a young man who volunteers to serve his country, right? And he comes to realize that in order to serve his country, he's being expected to defend what Israel is doing. Now we'll get to the substance of that, right? But let's understand, we've already sacrificed 3 soldiers in Jordan who were in their beds, sleep,
Right.
who were similar age as Aaron Bushnell, right? Right. Where some random scud that the military industrial complex had sold us a multi-billion-dollar missile defense system that was supposed to be protecting them in their sleep,
True.
right? And we know as a matter of public record that the system malfunctioned and the scud just happened to get through and killed 3 of our service members. I tell you this much, I could barely breathe when I think about having to talk to a parent that we sacrifice your child. For what? For what? This is what Aaron Bushnell is talking about. So now, what we use our military for is like hired thugs who work for the billionaires to advance their profit margins. That's what we've reduced them to. That's why we don't need to win wars. Because just like the house in the casino, the house always wins. It's getting a slice from the other side,
Just a quick,
right?
just a quick input. Even though I don't want this to derail us, but I do want to just mention, I'm reminded when you said that of none other than the whole privateers of Blackwater and the kinds of stuff that we've seen post Iraq, or right from the very beginning of Fallujah, quite frankly, Eric Prince. So just pack that away for later too. But that's another unfortunate reality of this situation.
So let's round it down. Okay, when it was economics, when it was Iraqi oil, when it's okay, all right, maybe, all right, we need this or this, that kind of thing. What Aaron Bushnell is saying is that the agenda has gone too far in this case. So let's put the third rail front and center right here.
Wow, I
If
appreciate
if
you
we
saying that. I do,
Yeah,
considering our
yeah,
conversations the last
yes,
couple of days.
that's right. No,
Yep.
because it becomes, the problem is the narrative is forcing you to either ignore that it's a genocide and say and characterize it as self-defense, or acknowledge it's a genocide. You can't hold in your head both those two things. Okay. So then let's look at it. Let's look at it. Okay, there's no question. On October 7th, Hamas slaughtered 1,139 people who happened to be in Israel. Because I know there's different nationalities and some
There were,
Americans. Right,
absolutely.
right. But slaughtered 1,139 people in Israeli territory. There is no there's no justification. Not trying, and this is me fully cognizant of that this issue did not start on October 7th. So okay,
As you have fairly mentioned in the past, which is very
yeah. So let's
and correct.
full stop. Now, if you could wrap in your brain the idea that the slaughter of 1,139 people in Israel on October 7th is an order of magnitude greater than 9/11 because of the size of the Israeli population, which is around 8 million, right? Okay. If you could hold that in your head, then how do you hold in your head that in the interest of Israel's self-defense, it's justifiable to slaughter what, 13,000 children,
Mm-hmm.
over 8,000 women, over 30,000 people, and over 90% of which are civilian? More media, more people, more press have been murdered than in World War II, then in Vietnam, then in World War One, right? All in okay, by Israel, right? I mean, they are destroying cemeteries. We have video of the IDF after killing families, laying in the kids' beds. They have an official website. On one of the social medias, a channel laying in people's beds. After with the fluffy animals. I mean, they are live streaming what they're doing. Okay, so if 13,000 children, I mean, how do you put in your head, what is 13,000 children compared to 1,139 people? So virulent is the bloodlust. And I use those words intentionally. That we know, we've seen with our own eyes, 3 Israeli hostages found a way to escape Hamas. Were waving the international sign of surrender, a white flag. And the IDF assassinated, slaughtered each of them. Their own people. Let that sink in. Okay, because I can tell you this much. In every major conflict over the 20th century, we've had prisoners of war. Hollywood had a show about American prisoners of war in Nazi Germany, Hogan's Heroes. That shit was actually true. Not the storylines in Hogan's Heroes, but the fact that countries had, civilized countries accept that a combatant can surrender. That's why we have the international sign of surrender. There is nothing wrong with a combatant in a combat saying, I'm done. And you take them as a prisoner of war. But what is Israel doing? They are assassinating people they are slaughtering people who are surrendering. And even when it's their own people. Okay? Okay, so whether what they're doing is genocide is not a feeling. And I'm so done with the people who are lying to us, talking about how they feel it may or may not. No, we have a genocide convention and it's not long. There's one page that puts the definition of genocide, one page, and it's in plain English. And oh, by the way, the United States was principal in drafting it. And that the United States is a signature to it. Most of the countries in the world are a signature to it. Israel is a signature to it. In fact, under Israeli national law, genocide and public incitement for genocide is a capital offense under Israeli law. But if you go to the Genocide Convention, which they all agreed to, and define genocide, you'll see. Read it. It's less than a page. It's less than a paragraph, right? And look at it. Under the convention, there is no justification for genocide. Someone could try to commit genocide against you, and you're not authorized to commit genocide against them. Self-defense is not a defense for genocide. Israel agreed to that. We agreed to that. Okay. It just involves the indiscriminate slaughter of a designated classification of people, right? Where you remove, you're trying to erase their existence. Right? And so we set up an international court of justice to assess crimes against humanity. All of us, all member nations of the United Nations agreed to this. That international court of justice, 17 judges, ruled 15-2 that it's plausible that Israel is committing genocide. 16-1 that Israel must punish all people who are engaged in a public incitement to commit genocide, and they must stop doing it. That 16-1 decision included the Israeli judge. Okay? 16-1, the court said Israel must allow humanitarian aid to get in to the people of Gaza. Must. That included in that 16-1, once again, was the Israeli judge. Okay? So this is the legal process by which the world tries to regulate these things. And what has Israel done since January 26th, when the court ruled? Israel turned around and accused the only humanitarian organization responsible for getting aid to the Palestinians, accused them, said that 12 of their 30,000 employees participated in October 7th. Israel said this the day that the court made their ruling. And just like clockwork, the United States and her allies defunded the humanitarian agency that is providing the aid. Okay? Now, has Israel provided evidence? It's been covered. Quietly. Hell no. Some allegations about what the Israeli intelligence service said about something or another. No proof, no tangible proof of the 12. The agency fired the people without further investigation on the allegation alone. And the United States and her allies have still chosen not to fund that agency. What has Israel done on top of that? They are reducing the humanitarian aid. Agencies around the world said you need 500 trucks. There's 2 million people in Gaza. You need 500 trucks a day. Before coming into the ICJ's ruling, about 150 trucks a day were getting in. Since the ICJ's ruling, since the Israeli judge, along with the American judge and 16 of 17 judges said that you have to get humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, Israel has pushed the truck total down to 50. 50 Israeli civilians are protesting and blocking the trucks. And they're celebrating. It's on video. They actually have one of those jumpy houses where your kids go in and they jump 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 and the balls are in there and stuff like that. They're doing this while they're blocking the humanitarian aid that the International Court of Justice ordered that Israel could not block. They didn't say that Israel had to provide the aid. There are other people who will provide the aid. They just have to let it in. This is how Israel has responded. Since the ICJ said that they have to stop committing genocide, stop killing and harming the Palestinians, the rate of murder has gone up. This is what I'm talking. Over 3,000 have been killed in the month since the ICJ ruled. So this is what Aaron Bushnell is talking about. We are using the United States is the only country in the world standing in the way 4 times of the United Nations ordering a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. We used our veto authority. Us. We stand against the entire world with Israel on this issue. We have US military. We have an aircraft carrier group. We are supporting with logistics. Our tax dollars are paying, or our dollars, tax dollars or not, our dollars are paying for the weapons. We're funding Israel. We're giving them the diplomatic cover. And this is what they're doing. So let me clue you to another provision of the Genocide Convention. Complicity to commit genocide is a crime against humanity. We are complicit in this genocide because Israel can't do it without our diplomatic cover. They can't do it without the billions of dollars we're providing them. They can't do it without the weapons we're providing them. We are complicit to this genocide. And Aaron Bushnell, who agreed to give his life in defense of his country, said, I cannot be used in that way. I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide. If we have any chance to share the $70 trillion secret, the truth of how we've been robbed. Our fellow Americans have to shed the lies wherever they exist. Wherever they exist. Patrick, I love you, brother, but if you are the purveyor of truth, you can't associate yourself with a lie of this magnitude. You either have to, there's no middle ground on this issue. Either you are standing with definition, the narrative is saying that Israel is doing what they're doing to defend themselves. That is literally their defense.
Wait a second. You just talked for like a while and you made an excellent case. Are you accusing me of something?
No.
Okay, let's back off of that real quick because I haven't had a
No.
chance to say anything.
No,
Okay.
Patrick, don't get
All right,
defensive.
cool.
I'm not.
Cool. No,
my
that's all
words
good.
are-
What I was
the
hearing
tape
there
is-
was a blanket
hold.
statement of like,
The tape is rolling.
I
My
know.
words are clear. What I'm saying here to you, it's an invitation for why we're having this conversation. If
Sure.
you want, the reason why this is relevant to the Clean New Deal, the reason why this is relevant to the con and to the new untouchables, is that the same vehicle, the manipulation of narrative that allows the con to exist, is at play right here. Is right here. Because the con that we're being
Have
told.
you? Let me just ask you a question.
Let me just say this, and I'm done. And then I'll turn it over to you because
It's okay if we have a conversation too at this point. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, no, it is.
Point, but it's like yeah, you've touched on a lot of things that I need to address. But please,
I want you to, and I'm going to sit back and listen as I usually do. Right? The idea is that narrative has been used to obscure what the powers at be have been doing, where they've been robbing us of trillions of dollars. And the narrative is being used right here to obscure what Israel is doing. Right. And what I'm saying to you here is that if we don't get people to challenge the narrative, they don't have to believe me. All they have to do is verify it themselves. Look at what the Genocide Convention says. Look at the unquestioned death toll we're talking, and see for yourself whether or not defense, because that's the narrative. Israel is defending themselves. They have a right to defense, right? I don't deny Israel has a right to defense, right? What I deny them is the idea that genocide can be done in defense of your national security. It cannot be. It has no justification. I'm done.
Okay, so was there anything in that contextualization that you have heard me say that suggests that I am defending genocide?
No, and I didn't say you are.
Okay, I just want to clear that up for anybody who's.
I don't think in any way I know you.
I just want to make sure that everybody who's listening to this doesn't think that's the case, because it's not the case. Sorry to raise my voice. I want to ask you another question now. What have you heard me say out of curiosity as it relates to Gaza? Because I've said a lot about this in Truth Bombs. You might not have heard all of them, but I'm just curious what you think my position is on this. But it's bigger than both of us. But
I don't think. Why don't you just say your position? Because I do know. Well, just say your position, because I don't think that's the point. Is not my interpretation.
Let me start with what I've always started with. Okay, so I've been to the Richie Richland estates of Potomac, Maryland. I know who the military contractors are. To your initial point, okay, I understand the last 23 years. Right? So first thing I'm going to address is that for those who at maybe the mid part of the conflict after October 7th were suggesting, as they always do in these particular scenarios, that the ridiculous irresponsibility by the IDF and the Israelis and everything they're doing is just creating a new generation of terrorists that are going to have blowback in a massive way. That's what I always hear. My first thing is you haven't been paying attention the last 20 years. That's the point of the military industrial complex with these contractors. They're like, where do you think we get our bread and butter?
Yeah.
That's the first point. Now, the second point is, again, as I established at the beginning, and this is why I was a little bit hesitant to really want to make this central, but you started with the idea that there is a reason why the system, the third rail, the power, cannot allow what it is that I have been bringing for now 3 years nonstop, because we had our work, The Con, at www.thecon.tv, suppressed, oppressed, minimized, algorithmed out of existence, because it's the truth. The truth that the $90 billion apparatus of our Department of Justice, of the Federal Bureau of Investigations, of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and all matters, shapes, or form of regulatory bodies, from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency to the Office of Thrift Supervision, that has now been, morphed into the OCC, and so many other elements of our government, and most notably, that operate to the tune of $90 billion a year with tens of thousands of employees, plus the media with tens of thousands of employees and an additional billions of dollars of budget, could not tell the truth of what happened.
Yeah.
Now, is it a metaphorical truth, my friend Kevin, of what we present? Is it some sort of ethereal, religious sort of idea, spiritual sort of connection with this internal, instinct of ours, of some higher, or is it just the evidence based on the law, based on the narrative, not narrative, based on the way the law is written, with different degrees of how these things work, that are on display every single day, aka Donald Trump, when the government is demonstrating exactly what Donald Trump is guilty of. But unfortunately, that the system that is behind the $70 trillion truth, and counting in a monumental way, at $70 trillion up until basically roughly 2021. Okay, that doesn't include all the stuff that took place last year with all of the bank runs based on the bankruptcies of Silicon Valley Bank and the other ones associated with crypto and commercial real estate, that got covered up really freaking quickly, to basically reveal what you and I both understand, that we're understanding more and more clear every single day, that bleeds into this situation that is a monumental disaster. I'll say up front before I start to address the genocide that, of course, I admit is genocide, because it's clearly genocide. And there's a reason, I think, that it's occurring the way it is, okay? Which comes from my understanding of the entirety of the conflict, going back to the beginning, going back to the Holocaust, going back to 1,000 years of all sorts of stuff, including, all of the different elements of the power structure in the Middle East. I mean, I'll address that. And this is why, in some ways, I try to avoid it, because are they the same thing? Are they part and parcel? In many ways, yes. Let's say if we're looking at the entirety of the alphabet, maybe up until T, to be quite frank with you. What I mean by that analogy is that what Kevin has said all the time is that what we're revealing are the elites, are the ones that are in complete control, that are all of our enemy. Okay, well, who are the elites? And they're not elites, because I hate to use that terminology, because they're not elites. They may have come out of Ivy League schools, but they're thieves. That's it. That have figured out and discovered a methodology post 2008, even though it was already baked in. We had a thing back in the 90s that we called the Greenspan put, which guaranteed the markets. They've just been, learning how far they can expand the ability of our plumbing, is the way they like to call it, from the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, of how they can ultimately guarantee this nonstop debt machine that is now putting the whole world into yet another sort of tripwire event, that, because of what we're talking about, and because of the genocide, and because of the absolute insanity of those that are in control of the Israeli government, based on what happened on October 7th. But it's not just based on what happened on October 7th. It's based on a plan that we all failed to understand and recognize and prevent decades in the making. Okay, I can tell you right now that the conversation of a two-state solution has been around for a long time. And the Israelis, and by extension, their supporters in the United States, particularly through AIPAC, discovered a potential problem a long time ago to the so-called democracy of the Middle East, or Israel being the only democracy in the Middle East, which it was to a degree. And we can discuss the nuances, we can discuss everything. But It was also a socialist country for those of you who are socialist for the most part. Okay. But there are elements that expanded out of that socialism into something that mechanically has created the Israel that we're looking at the moment. Okay. And that Israel that we're looking at the moment as a shortcut without a whole dissertation that takes 8 hours to demonstrate, which I can actually do, but they are an extension of the military industrial complex. Absolutely. Contractors. And there's a reason, in my opinion, that Israel has become, and I hate to say this in context, to genocide, because this is what's so absolutely nauseatingly disgusting for somebody from I come from. Israel has made itself the indispensable nation in a Middle East of tyrants. So going back to Aaron Bushnell's situation and self-immolating yesterday. Back in 2011, there was a merchant, and I think it was in Tunisia. I can't remember exactly where his location was. Was it Tunisia?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where he lit himself on fire. He lit himself on fire, and it sparked what we called the Arab Spring. Absolutely. The Arab Spring, for a short time, was a fight for democracy, was a fight to push against the tyranny of the oil what do we call them? The petro dictatorships of the Middle East.
Yes.
Okay.
And where do those people? Where is that power vested?
Right, and don't forget, President Obama at that time really kind of made this sort of a centerpiece, but then it kind of got bled and ground down with all of the protests that were happening in Egypt, which was the centerpiece that were challenging the status quo of the region. That ultimately there was this element of, okay, now we got to pivot to understanding where this, I'm talking about this time period was about 2011, where Iran's nuclear capacity was kind of front and center. And Obama's administration began to reach out. I think the whole focal point was, no, we've got to find a sort of peaceful solution through incentives that we're going to work with the powers that be in Iran to try to find other alternatives to what was then. The Iranians were claiming that the entire centrifuge, and they were getting this technology from the guy who was the father of the Islamic nuclear program in Pakistan, whose name eludes me at the moment, but he was also working with the Iranians. But they were building, there's in the process of creating the ability to create a nuclear program. The difference between civil and then ultimately military is ultimately in the at the very end of the program in terms of the enrichment of uranium. Okay. And so that became this kind of center thing. Right. And I remember watching.
But Patrick,
hold on, let me finish my point because, okay, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I'm not going to, it relates to this narrow point. Okay. But as long as we acknowledge that the reason why Iran, when it was developing their own nuclear weapon, is because Israel did.
Sure.
In contravention of international law and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the United States, this is what they do. We let Israel do it. So now Iran, advancing their own national security interests, doesn't every country have a right to defend themselves? Okay, so
this gets back to where but who has control and why? Okay,
but I understand that. But the fact is Israel got a nuclear weapon, developed a nuclear weapon in contravention of international treaties.
Sure,
right? Yeah, exactly. And
what would the Israeli position be on that at that time period?
No.
But what would their position be? What would their position be at that time?
All I'm saying here is that's why.
Okay, dude, just answer the question. Why would they do that at the time? I mean, you're right about the international law and the hypocrisy of the whole thing. Okay, yeah, I acknowledge that, but just why was Israel developing?
They feel like it was in their national security interests.
Okay, so fine. That's it. That's all you had to say. Okay, so that's it at that stage. Okay, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that's what happened at that time. And when you come out of the Holocaust and you're in that position in the world, okay, so that was at that time period. We're not, again, if we're going to talk about this, see, this is where it gets frustrating because then it could go bigger and bigger and bigger. Let's just take it back to the whole point of what we're talking about, okay? And you kind of challenging me, even though you didn't say that I in any way defending genocide. But there was an implication. But I do not.
No, it's an invitation, not an implication.
Okay, fine.
I'm
But
inviting you
people
to
need to understand
declare
where I'm
your,
coming from.
because I know you oppose
If you
genocide.
want to understand where I'm coming from, okay, look,
Yeah.
from the very beginning, I hate fascism above all else. Okay, why do I hate fascism, Kevin?
because because it destroys democracy, because
And what
because
else?
it destroys
Led to
the
genocide.
economy.
Led to genocide.
Well,
And
it
the
certainly led to
Holocaust.
genocide. Yes.
Okay, so would a Jewish guy be anti-fascist? Yeah, especially if you believe in democracy, which is what most Jews of my, especially Reform Jews of my era, are. Okay, so that's for, and by the way, there were hundreds of thousands of them protesting against Netanyahu prior to October 7th. Okay, because of stuff that was going on with corruption, because Netanyahu has been corrupt for a very long time.
So let's differentiate that is the government of Israel from the people from Jews worldwide, because there's much dissent.
But there has been a movement. This is to your point. I'm trying to acknowledge your point, okay? Because you can't look at October 7th without in a vacuum. There's a lot of stuff that took place prior to this, and my frustration has always been that nobody could stop what was going on. We saw, for example, Sheldon Adelson's money and influence with the presidential elections of all parties and everything else lead to expansion of settlers in the West Bank, and of course, then everything that took place during the Trump administration, while simultaneously, let's not lose sight of the fact that Trump was bridging what they call the Abraham Accords, which we've seen the results of Steve Mnuchin and Jared Kushner basically being implemented in a resolution of ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which was part and parcel, supposedly, of why Hamas attacked when it did, right, on October 7th. But that's enough. Look, I've been listening to Roger Waters the whole time. Okay. Again, I grew up in a time period where Pink Floyd had a huge influence on me. Roger Waters' The Wall was probably the most seminal. I'm still trying to figure it out, and it was the most important, frustrating film, because what it ultimately signified was this pendulum, if you will, between liberty and chaos and anarchy and freedom to fascism, and back and forth throughout history, and it never ends. That was my big frustration with The Wall, even though I was like, this seems to be like human history. Okay. And so I use that to give you some perspective of how I look at the situation we're in now. Do I recognize that Roger Waters in, let's say, 2003 started ramping up in terms of his understanding of BDS and his understanding of what was happening in Gaza as the open air prison because of everything that took place before that, and yada, yada, yada? Again, big, huge conversation. I'm going to bring it back to the military industrial complex, into military contractors, into the expansion of what you called the at the beginning, the guys from the muscle that worked to break up the unions.
The Pinkertons.
The Pinkertons. Okay? So look,
that's what they reduced.
Post 9/11, there's a great documentary, for example, called Turning Point on Netflix about everything that took place in Afghanistan after 9/11, ultimately the latter years. And some of the most frustrating aspects of what I saw were troops that have been stationed there forever. They were like, nobody even knows why we're here. You know, we're losing our limbs, we're getting paralyzed, this and that. But what's the outcome and why? And I got to tell you, on a personal basis, I've become very close friends with a guy whose job was to target what they called high value targets. And he was telling me stories between Iraq and Afghanistan that they would walk out in the desert and meet, if you want to call them warlords or any version of people that they needed to lie with truckloads of cash. Truckloads of cash that they just, and he's like, I didn't even know what to think about this. And he said, I'll be honest with you, most of the people I engaged in theater, they couldn't tell you about regional conflict. They couldn't tell you about Saudi oil or its positioning within context to the global oil reserve that undergirds the commoditization of the dollar based on being the swing producer in the United States, having this grand position of being the world's reserve currency and everything that leads into, based on what we're talking about. And, you know, the people on the ground from his perspective were like basically farmers. You know, and all they were looking at was how do they survive? And it got to a point where he was telling me stories like they would arrest people. And this was in Iraq that would throw them in Abu Ghraib, and you would have all these guys there that had no inclination of what was happening in the war there, but then they got thrown into this massive prison, and it was there that they started to manifest ISIS, because when they got together in prison based on these extreme conditions, that they started going extreme in a way that gave birth to ISIS. Okay, that was, so put that together. Oodles and oodles of endless cash on the war front to find warlord allies, arrest the rest that don't get the cash, that go into the prisons, that move into ISIS. This is this pattern of blowback that we're talking about. This is this pattern of this situation that not enough people think about when they think about, okay, you're going to create, yes, you are creating blowback, but you're also creating blowback for these never-ending wars, these never-ending cycles. Now, if we want to focus, look, I really don't want to go into every single detail of what's happened since October 7th, but I'll tell you what my theory is on the whole thing. I think that Netanyahu and the IDF knew exactly what was plotted. We saw it in the New York Times, that they suppressed it. A lot of ways, the way I look at 9/11, they decided not to have a full-throated defense against that. They, I believe, given all of the things that I've laid out,
they allowed it to happen.
Yeah, allowed it to happen for a causation, for a PR stunt, to do something that I think this side of Likud, this side of Netanyahu, this side of the extremists, this side of the people that have been funded by the Sheldon Adelsons of the world, and those that are stoking the Trump side of the house, and all of those things within Saudi as well, which is another piece of this thing, because this is where it ends up. When you become an intelligence, military sort of, and all of these things. And let me tell you, Mossad's been involved with some really twisted stuff over the last 20 years. I'll give you an example. Mossad was actually working with the guys like, for example, Harvey Weinstein, to cover up a lot of his stuff and to leverage politicians or anybody who wanted to be a threat to Harvey Weinstein. And that's on the, the intelligence side. Listen, I've always said, and this has been my being from day one, if your ideals, if your ideology is not in alignment with your actions, then you're in disarray. That's who I am, right? I'm all about the integrity of law. I'm a brawler. I've always been anti-fascist. I've gotten into fights with neo-Nazis. I've gotten freaking teeth in my fist. Okay, hold on a second. But from that standpoint, do you know how hard it is for somebody like me to acknowledge, not to acknowledge, to look at genocide? And you said it at the very beginning when we first started talking, when there are street gangs in Los Angeles or Detroit or wherever else that are embedded in communities, do we wipe out the entire communities of South Central Los Angeles or East LA? No, we don't do that. There's cops, there's things that go on, and there's all sorts of shit that happens. That's I guess living in a free society to a degree. And hopefully you've got the cops on the floor. Look, this shit's gone disarray. But let me bring it back full circle to two things that I think are the most important aspects of what we're dealing with. One is, I started watching and I got through 5 episodes of Giannis Varoufakis's In the Eye of the Storm. Okay,
but hold it. We got to talk about. We got to finish up Gaza before we talk about Giannis.
Okay, Giannis is talking about Gaza a lot, but anyway.
Yeah, I know he does, and I know it's relevant. But
go ahead.
But here's the thing, and because this conversation is called truth bombs.
It's all what?
It's called truth bombs.
Oh yeah, truth bombs.
So let's drop some truth bombs.
Yeah.
The idea that we don't control what's happening in Israel, that the United States doesn't control what's happening to Israel. I point you, everyone
There's no question.
Get a little Google machine going and put in Joe Biden's, Israel, if she didn't exist, America would have to invent her. Nonsense. A statement that he made on the floor of the United States Senate back in the 1990s, speaking the quiet part out loud. The fact is that yes, Israel is a vehicle for the conflicts in the Middle East that keep the conflicts going, that keep the arms sales going. Israel is good for business. Joe Biden just said the truth out loud. If Israel did not exist, America would have to invent her. Let's let that sink in. You said yourself that the evidence supports the idea that Netanyahu allowed October 7th to happen.
Not much.
by not putting adequate forces there, despite the fact that the Egyptians gave him heads up months, significantly in advance.
Yeah.
And instead, okay, all right. Well, think about the pathology we're talking about. So he allowed the slaughter of 1,139, people in Israel,
Right.
in order for him to do what, right? And I'm sorry, this is what I'm
Reminding the
saying.
3,000 people that got vaporized on 9/11 and 4 million
No.
that died since. Yeah,
We
no, I get the idea.
will give voice and space. And no matter how painful it is, look at the fact that we're killing hundreds of children a day. We're killing hundreds of people a day in Gaza, right? The starving to death. 80% of the population starving to death.
I saw the footage of
We are-
what was
yeah,
happening yesterday when they were handing out supplies and then people basically having to attack each other in the process. Yeah, I've seen
yeah,
it.
no. Israeli citizens outside blocking the trucks and celebrating.
It's insanity.
Okay,
It's
right.
insanity. Yes,
No.
it's
So
insanity.
we're
No,
gonna
it's insanity. You're saying
it
it,
is insanity, but
of course it's insanity.
we need to give some time in this conversation. We're not going to whitewash what genocide actually looks like.
Is that what
Okay,
I'm doing? I'm whitewashing?
no, no, no,
Okay, please.
but we're not.
Sometimes okay, that's fine. We're talking to the
No,
we're talking to the
no.
audience.
The point is, we're putting it on the table. We're talking about it. We're examining it. We're exposing it so that we can't ignore it. We're not moving on to another point. This is the point. There is nothing more important in this world today, nothing, than the genocide in Gaza. If I could not imagine something would trump the $70 trillion secret. I'm sorry, I found it. This is it. This is what he's saying. Aaron Bushnell and stuff like that. When we are watching, they showed an infant in ICU who is slowly asphyxiating because the electricity was turned off, and then he died. That shit, right? We are paying for that. That's what they're doing right now. And since the world's highest court found that it was plausible that they're doing it, they've only intensified doing it more.
What do you want to see happen right now as a result of this? Since this is the future of the world for you, and that's what we're doing, that's fine with these truth bombs. Fine. Tell us what has to happen now. What do you want to see happen?
Well, I can tell you, I can tell you what I think is going to happen now. And what I think is going to happen now is what happens when you deny people the peaceful means for redress. What is, in our history, if you deny people the peaceful means of redress, they will take violent means. So what is happening right now? Putin is hosting Hamas and the Palestinians. You are going to have.
Wow. I did not know that. When did that happen?
They just announced it. It just came across, it's happening. And what I'm trying to say to you here is it's not going to be Iran by themselves. You're going to see Russia. You're going to see China. You're going to see Iran stand with the Palestinians and dare.
Aren't they already?
States. Oh, no, not with their militaries and their nuclear might.
Okay.
So let me just be clear. The world is trying to handle this through peaceful means. We have 4 petitions at the United Nations calling for a humanitarian ceasefire. None of those petitions says that Israel does not have a right to defend themselves. None of those petitions say that Israel does not have a right to seek out Hamas. They're trying to say that you cannot continue to slaughter Palestinian civilians, right? Okay, and 4 times the United States have blocked it. The highest court on the globe has ruled 15-2 that this is, the genocide is plausibly happening. And in response to that genocide, Israel has intensified the genocide. It's doing it at a higher rate. Okay. We are exhausting.
You know what rate they're doing it to? You know what they're rate? No. I'll ask the question. Do you know what rate they're doing it to? I'll tell you what rate they're doing it to. It matches Rwanda in 19. That's the rate of kill. That's where we are. Okay. So yeah, you're right. It's a slaughter and it's going to blow up even further. Okay. So what has to happen now?
That's why I'm asking you a question. What is happening now? If we exhaust, if they render the International Court of Justice moot because we are going to ignore it and not let the enforcement mechanism, which is supposed to be the United Nations Security Council, enforce their rulings, right? Then they're going to do it by military force. And let me tell you what that's going to mean. America is going to have to make a choice because Israel could get destroyed in that. And yeah, believe me when I say it's for real. Analysts are really talking about this stuff outside of the mainstream
I see it happening that way. I've been waiting for it to happen that way since the beginning.
Israel could get destroyed in this. And the choice that America would have is, do we go to full-scale nuclear war over Israel?
Right.
And oh, by the way, for all our friends in Israel, take a look at what's happening over in Ukraine, because that's what happens to American allies, right? Okay, so when those forces line up against you, and America has a choice as to whether they're going to empty the barrel, right? I can be rest assured, right, that you are going to be the ones who are going to be the Ukrainians of 2025, right? So you might want to think about what happens when you deny the world all the legal, peaceful ways to solve this problem. They will not stand and watch the Palestinians, 2 million people, get slaughtered. So it's coming. That's my prediction.
Okay. So our point was today to start with. Now, it's interesting to see how this has come full circle to becoming the centerpiece of where you are. Okay, that's fine. This is the most important issue to you. That's fine.
Look at the choice that we have in America today.
Look, I've been predicting that this was a tripwire for World War III based on everything I've been talking about for a long time, yes, including not handling this problem for the last 20 years. Okay. This is the big reveal. Okay. The big reveal is money rules the world. For whom? For whom, Kevin?
Yeah, but here's the thing. That's why it comes down to the Clean New Deal.
Right. That's the point.
But let's unpack that some. Because the choice that we have from the 2 major parties is fascism on one side, Donald Trump, January 6th, right? And then we have fascism on fascism.
I just said that, by the way. I just said that on one of my tweets today. That's why I said the choice is corporate fascism that's undergirded by socialism for the elite, which is the full faith and credit of the United States, or just cultural fascism. Take your pick.
But the thing about it is,
they're both suicide.
The Biden version is more literal. The Biden version is more literal. If you are a fan of democracy, right, and as a result, you feel that because Trump did not accept the election, tried to interfere with the election, tried to plant the seeds for an insurrection, because he didn't want to peacefully transfer power. Right? And you think that's a threat to democracy. Let me show you how democracy dies. For the first time, we've had the selection of a candidate, a nomination for a major political party for the presidency that was actually contested, where that party, the Democratic Party, has shut down the election. So if you are in the state of New Hampshire, right, your delegates don't count. Right? If you're in the state of Florida, they've already shut down and canceled the primary And so Biden is the nominee of the Democratic Party based on the first sham of selection process.
Right.
Whatever you want to criticize Trump
and yet this is a battle for democracy versus fascism. Right.
Yes,
it's all bullshit.
That's what I'm saying.
I get it. And we've been talking about it every day, and we need people to understand.
We need to I know you get it, but we need to underline the magnitude of who Joe Biden is. So let's riff on Joe Biden for a second, because my point is going to be to you, if this really is the choice of the lesser of two evils, I guarantee you I can prove Biden is far more evil than Trump. So here we go. He's already the guy who made his bones unshackling the credit card industry
Yep.
to create the debt peonage that so many Americans suffer from. This is why Delaware is the home for all these organizations who
That's right.
rake us with their fees and stuff like that. That's Joe Biden.
Yep.
It
And
was Joe
prison
Biden.
industrial complex.
Huh?
Prison industrial complex.
Yeah, right. So this is Joe Biden. It's Joe Biden's 94 crime bill that doubled the prison population in the United States, most of which were white, even though 33% of all prisoners are black.
Right.
The aggregate
Pharmaceutical
is
industry.
Right. Okay. That's Joe Biden, right? Okay. Joe
Deregulation
Biden,
of finance.
yeah, okay. Well, that's Clinton, but Joe Biden
Biden was in the mix.
No, of course, but all I'm
What is
saying
the
is
point of Delaware? That's the point.
right. Joe Biden is the one who's actually paying for circumventing the Congress to giving diplomatic cover for the genocide that's going on in Israel. You know, some acts are so severe that I would never, no matter how much I hate someone, I would never say that they would do a heinous act that they've actually never done just because they have bad character.
Didn't Joe Biden give us Clarence Thomas too, to a degree?
Yes.
He was the chairman what about censoring lyrics on rap bands? Wasn't there a whole big deal about all of those guys?
Okay, so you're only agreeing with my point. My point is,
did you think I wouldn't?
No. Again, we're talking to the crowd.
Sometimes I'm making sure because I think it's just not a point counterpoint. We're just
yes, we're on the same page. But this is what I'm saying. We have to smash once and for all. This is what Aaron Bushnell's act does. If you vote for Joe Biden, you are voting for genocide.
You're not suggesting that it's okay to vote for Trump, are you?
No. Hey.
No. Come on. I mean,
I'm not.
I know that you don't.
I am not. I am advocating to vote for an independent.
There you go.
Support the Clean New Deal. What I'm trying to say here is that right. Your choices are Trump, or your choices are Biden. And I'm telling you this much.
Doesn't work.
The narrative that we are being told in America is that Biden is the sensible choice. I mean, isn't that true? Isn't that what they're saying?
Biden every single night, mainstream media decides to cherry pick about what's going on with Trump that they will never allow, that we have revealed about Wall Street to the tune of $70 trillion. Okay, so
yes, so that's what I'm saying.
Can I leave the dialogue a little bit here? Can I leave?
Yes. So
you asked me to watch, which I was planning on doing anyway. You just kind of turned it up a little bit in terms of my putting it as my priority. But in the eye of the storm, okay, with Yanis Varoufakis. So a couple of things that Yanis Varoufakis said that I'm very proud to know that he did, because I'd like to know when they actually filmed these last interviews. I could tell as a producer there were certain things that happened recently, but he mentioned financial terrorism and he mentioned toxic deception, both of which I've never heard him actually say prior to recently, which I'm not going to give myself full credit for that, but I'm going to say that, yeah, we talked about that. And I say that in my emails to him all the time. And I did reach out to Yanis Varoufakis, and boy, did he make particularly one of the most compelling sort of arguments. And I didn't know this about him, and I probably should have, but the story about his father. And I find myself kind of in the same position when we started talking about my view on Israel and Palestine based on being a Jewish person and understanding all things Holocaust and Hitler and genocide and the Holocaust and the creation of Israel and everything that's happened since and all of the things that go into it. And I can tell you that when I saw that Yanis Varoufakis' father was in the midst of, he was right in the middle of both fascism and communism, by the way, and he didn't bend the knee to either. And there were the incredibly compelling stories where he put his life on the line to, do what he had to do with integrity and justice. Okay. And this was in prison camps. And this was, literally they came, the state police, they came in and ripped him out of his house, because of this story you got to see in the eye of the storm to be able to understand what the background of this, but it set the tone of where Greece was after World War II, which furthers, if you understand where the United States and the Soviet Union were in the supposed Cold War, but particularly with the CIA, which was using undergrounded fascistic right-wing paramilitary groups as bulwarks against, Russia, the CIA was in the midst of a whole lot of stuff that I could just infer hearing from Giannis's dad's sort of story, that it wasn't too far outside of the realm of what created that reality of which he found himself in the midst of, right? Which was the same story that we're talking about now. Okay, so I could understand this sort of a incredible devotion to democracy by Yanis Varoufakis, the birthplace of democracy being Greece. And we know that democracy has never been perfect, especially in the beginnings with Greece, because it was the oligarchy 1,000 years ago, or 1,500 years ago, or however, I guess we're talking about, 1500s or whatever. But the nature of the argument that ultimately Yanis Varoufakis gets to is capitalism, and he goes into all of the detail about how we're not capitalist, but he goes into the detail as capitalist, capitalism aligned or parallel, or can it work in cohesion with democracy? And he makes an incredibly compelling case that not at all. But he also taught, and I've always been aware of that my whole life, right? I've always been aware of that whole life. The difference between where I was coming from and where Giannis was my belief in the law, in the integrity of law. Because if you hold power to account and you hold the bad guys accountable, then you can make honest business a possibility. And we have had different versions of that. But eventually, when you get monopolies and you get these things where they have complete control, which is where, and this is where Giannis fell short, and this is where I am, and this is where I have been the whole time with Kevin, and what Kevin's talking about as the third rail with federal $70 trillion truth. Look, the biggest thing that Giannis reveals, honestly, that I've seen so far, and I'm just getting to episode 6, the final episode, so I don't think there's going to be too many curveballs because I think he's going to make his closing argument. But what he revealed, which is what I've known the whole time, power lies, okay? They lie. What does that mean? It's all a lie. The institutions don't have the integrity of what the law is written to accomplish, nor do we have the systems in play. It's not that the people in the FBI or the DOJ or the SEC are corrupt. It's that the guys that become the bosses through the revolving door are ultimately the guys in control, and they can put a banana slip in an investigation to where they basically prevent the law from working, which is what we've been doing nonstop for decades. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And Giannis and the powers that be are making the exact same arguments and showing you the exact same causation that I have in the con, and to a degree, maybe even more so, but unfortunately, to a degree, even less so. And this is the key consideration of everything. And this is why I'm telling you that I have to somehow have the voice of what we've revealed overcome this insane toxicity, this financial terrorism, this toxicity of deception that has complete control because it's hiding what we have evidence of. Again, the truth isn't some sort of spiritual connection to intuition that something inside your head because you can feel it with your body and soul. That's different than a murder investigation. That's different than any criminal investigation into anything where you have to prove, for example, in a criminal conviction, mens rea, so guilty mind, sans reas, guilty acts, opportunity, motive, intent. You solve those things all across the board in front of a jury trial, then you know what the law is, you know what the different degrees, you can get a conviction, which is the truth, which is not what we do in the United States anymore as it relates to power. Okay? Recently, we've had, so all of this insanity with Gaza, all of this insanity of defense, Israel is defending itself at this stage of the game through 30,000 dead and just all of the relentless campaign that everything that's involved with is just so mind-numbingly, insanely hard for somebody that understands that the Holocaust my whole life was like never again, only to do what? How about this irony of life? To create a Holocaust? Are you fucking kidding me? Okay, from where I'm coming from, it's beyond comprehension, but at the same time, it's completely parallel to everything that I'm talking about, particularly we're talking about as it relates to what the United States has done to allow absolute power to corrupt absolutely by discovering that plunder enables power to create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it, i.e. propaganda. This is Orwell, but just more technologically advanced. That's all. It's the same psychology, okay? If you know anything about Orwell in 1984 and Animal Farm, even though of course that's Stalin and everything, the bottom line is that what we did that unfortunately Yanis Varoufakis hasn't even been able to bring himself to say, and I'm not sure why, okay? Even though he has told me personally, because I've got an interview with him sitting on Patrick Global Truth Bombs the Con, that is still news today as it results. It's insane that the same John Paulson, who was the guy behind what became the largest short in the history of the world. You may have heard of The Big Short. The Big Short was small potatoes compared to what John Paulson was in the midst of. John Paulson walked with $20 billion based on information that yours truly has, that the Supreme Court sat on because the Supreme Court is corrupt, because the Supreme Court would not allow the teachers' pension of Arkansas or the plumbers of, the steel workers of America. And there was another class action lawsuit against Goldman Sachs, who, of course, if you watch my stuff and if you watch Yanis Varoufakis stuff, says, it's government Sachs, right? They're one of the biggest tentacles, arteries, heartbeats of this corruption, and have been for for a long time, okay? That just got revealed based on stuff that happened in 2008. Long and the short of it, as it relates to Yanis Varoufakis and what we're talking about here, none of this happens. None of this stuff works without the cycle of violence that the military-industrial complex can guarantee through military contractors as protection for a lot of the things that we depend on, oil, commoditization, everything else. That's one side of the equation. That's like financing our government based on future wars, and war is good for business. I think a lot of people have figured that a long time ago, right? That has nothing to do with democracy and the rule of law and the integrity of the United States and all of the humanistic sort of qualities that we're supposed to project with liberty and justice for all. No, we're way past that. But what Giannis missed was in the aftermath, even though he touchstones upon it, is that the nature and the magnitude of what took place at the Federal Reserve following the 2008 great financial crisis between the real troika, if you want to know the truth, the real troika, which was Alan Greenspan, who handed off to Ben Bernanke, but then, of course, Timothy Geithner and Hank Paulson, they met behind the doors 98 times to confangle this emergency stimulus lending program that was $33 trillion in 2009, and we're up to $70 trillion 2021, okay? To constantly finance fraud and great, what we call, and this is what the great powers of the imperial powers did throughout the 1700s before we had massive revolutions, right? They did what was a technique called smash and grab. Basically, they set countries up in debt peonage, and when they can't afford the debt, they use corrupt players to basically corral the political interests of those countries to where they can completely control the outcome and then get their natural resources in modern age. That might be something along the rare earth minerals or all of the things that we need to function in our society, fossil fuels, yada, 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 right? But they finance that through smash and grab, incredibly diabolical techniques of a tiny, tiny sliver of power who has complete control. Now, the interesting thing about what Kevin is suggesting by way of where Putin is with Hamas and China and Iran and all of these other things, is it like, do they not, I mean, this is an honest question to you. Do they not also, at the hierarchies of their power, not recognize the potential, Armageddon? Or is that like, does that work for everybody who's in power around the world? I mean, when you think back, honest question, back to World War I, right? When we had the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, we know that was kind of a ridiculous causation because there was so much else happening at the same time that then ultimately tripwired into World War I and everything that took place after. And you can't look at World War II without understanding World War I was what would create World War II. I mean, it was a continuation, right? So honestly, Kevin, when we're looking at this whole situation and we know how evil, we know how unbelievably diabolical and the betrayal that our powers that be in this system have gotten away with, and we know that we have to focus on them in the United States. Number one, that we, the people, have to rise against this tyranny. And there's hopefully a way to do it peacefully before it, necessitates a revolution during World War III or whatever else. You and I recognize that. But what about China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, India, and South Africa? Okay. Do they not have much of the same A, stakes, and B, unfortunate realities and causation of the powers that be that control the outcomes?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Patrick. Yeah, they do. Those countries have their own oligarchs. The difference, there's a red line, and it really stems from the use of the United States using military force to advance their economic
Please take up. I know people are going to want to hear.
to advance their economic agenda. So, those countries' oligarchs tend to be the enemies that we've created. See, part of the mythology and what President Eisenhower was warning us in 1960 when he left office about the dangers of the military-industrial complex is, one, it will become a business model. War will become a business model.
Amen. Boy, did it.
Right. And that Eisenhower was coming from a time of service, because he was the lead general in World War II, where war profiteering was treason. Let's understand that. War profiteering used to be treason. Our industry did not rake us. In fact, Americans bought bonds to support the war, cut back on the use of goods and services to support the soldiers. War profiteering was treason at the time.
Right.
Okay? And that the rise of the military industrial complex was making war good for business, what you said. And so the way that war stays good for business is that you have to have enemies.
Right.
And so what all of America's enemies since World War II, America picked. Let's wrap our brains around that. Okay? We picked the Soviet Union to be our enemy at the end of World War II. We did that. And if you need no further evidence, consider the fact that in the Marshall Plan, we decided to rebuild in the late 40s, a few years after the war, we decided to rebuild Germany, who killed 20 million Russians.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So let's understand that. So obviously,
West Germany.
I'm sorry.
We
agreed to build West Germany because the Soviets had control of East Germany. Okay, and we don't need to go down the path as to why they took control of Eastern Europe, but they didn't make it. It wasn't a part of the Soviet Union. It was a security buffer because of Western aggression. Okay, they lost 20 million
nuclear weapons.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, we picked the Soviet Union to be our enemy, not the American people. American capitalists and industrialists picked it, right? So okay, and so they were. And how many wars and surrogate wars did that conflict produce?
Yeah,
right?
Look no further than the CIA, by the way.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Okay, we picked Iran. See, this lie about Israel being the only democracy in the Arab world. It's such a profound lie. The only way you could believe it is you know nothing about history.
Right, and Israel's not a democracy now, and it hasn't been for some.
No, but I'm not.
Yeah. In the broader contextualization,
they vote. They elect a prime minister, or they have okay, they have a democracy based in form. Okay, well, Iran had a democracy in the 1950s, right? And they elected their democratic leader. Now, a part of the end of colonialism is after the British, relinquished control of Iran, right? They actually still had control of Iranian oil assets, right? British Petroleum.
Absolutely.
And so there was a negotiated deal that a fee splitting. So for every barrel of oil that British Petroleum would extract from out of Iranian reserves, the government and the people of Iran would get a certain percentage, and British Petroleum would get a certain percentage. And that under the contract, Iran had the right to see British Petroleum's books, to see the accounting, so that they can validate that they were getting their proper share, right? Well, so now Iran elects their leader. He's asking for the books to verify that he's getting the share, right? British Petroleum refuses to open up their books. So he says, if you refuse to open up your books to verify that we're getting our proper percentage of our own oil reserves, right? We will nationalize the oil.
Right.
Because he threatens to nationalize the oil, British Petroleum appeals to the British government, which appeals to the United States government, and we engage in the subterfuge of orchestrating a violent overthrow of that democratically elected government.
The Shah of Iran.
And we put the Shah of Iran in, who every major human rights organization over the next 20 years had him as is one of the worst. I mean, he was killing tens of thousands of Iranian dissidents while he was selling oil to us at a discount. Take a look at the comparison between oil in Europe and oil in the United States, oil in any non-OPEC country, and the United States. The United States has the best deal in the world if they're not an OPEC country. Why? Because we put the Shah. One of the reasons is we put the Shah of Iran in place in Iran. So of course, when the Shah went to start dying, from cancer in the mid-70s, and he was losing control over it, the Iranian Revolution was overthrowing him. They wanted to give
him, by the way, for treatment.
Yeah, they wanted to give him the Gaddafi treatment, right? But no, we arranged for his safe passage so that he can die comfortably in the Philippines. And the first thing a broke ass Iran did was attack the U.S. embassy. And even Jimmy Carter, the good one, right? The honest one, the Christian, didn't tell the American public why. So let's not get it straight. Let's not get it twisted. Obama was right for apologizing for Iran. Iran is our enemy because we made Iran our enemy. Let's understand that. And we keep on doing this. Putin is our enemy today because we made Putin our enemy. We've talked about the history from the breakup of the Soviet Union till today. We don't have to run the tape. My point is that in order.
Wait a second. One thing I challenge you about that, though, with Putin is, wait a second. If you okay, is Russia a Soviet state now?
No.
Okay, so what is it?
Russia is a free market capitalist state. They abdicated from communism with the dissolution of the Soviet Union.
Is Putin a wealthy man?
I imagine he is, of course.
I think he's insanely rich.
Yeah, I imagine he is. Oh, sure.
Do you know what he's done for the last 20 years?
Well, hold it. Is Bill Clinton a wealthy man?
Yeah, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Answer this question, please. What did Putin do with all of his to become as wealthy as he is over the course of the last 25 years?
I have no idea.
He extracted the wealth of his country and he put it into Western markets. So
that's why I asked you about Bill Clinton, because
his allies are the Western financial system.
I mean, why we cast these stones?
Wait, that's the facts. That's the facts.
No. But okay. Like
I'm just saying that he's used the system to his benefit.
But that's not why he's our enemy. He's our enemy. You know damn well why he's our enemy.
Is he really? But who is he enemy to?
We keep on forcing the issue.
I agree with what you're saying, but you're not listening to what I'm telling you. What has Putin done with the national wealth of the United States?
Why is that relevant?
Because he's using the system for his own corruption.
No. Every leader does this. I get it.
So wait, that doesn't matter?
No, but it's not relevant to the point we're trying to make right now.
Fine. I just wanted to ask me a question. That's not relevant.
You asked me a question of whether the oligarchs in Russia and China and South Africa, right? Whether
that was my initial question.
Whether they are facing the same existential.
About the people, yes.
Right, the people, and what I'm saying to you is those oligarchs are in the enemy crowd. Right? They have been made enemies on purpose by the United States. We're doing that to China right now,
Right,
right?
but we only since we
Okay,
took their
okay.
money. I
So
mean,
no. So
we've been playing ball with them for 25 years. I'm
so
talking about our elites.
so what I'm trying to say here is, in answering your question, is that no, this is not a scenario where the oligarchs are getting together, but only because there are two classes of these oligarchs,
Right.
right? They have their wealthy oligarchs who just is greedy, notorious, just a
Yeah.
sociopathic, all that's true. That's
Yeah.
why I'm saying the point about Putin is not relevant, is that, yeah, I understand that's true, but so is ours, right?
Right.
Okay.
So maybe there should be
So
a global revolution against those that have stolen from everybody.
yes, okay. Well, what's lining up? Here's what's lining up, is that more and more of the world are exposing the manner by which the United States holds control. And the
How,
manner by which
what?
holds control, the
Yeah,
manner by which the United States
mostly,
holds
yes.
control
Yeah.
is it uses its military and it uses the US dollar
Yep. As
you know,
weapons.
as weapons to destroy countries and manipulate and steal their natural resources.
Yep.
And this is what fuels our wealth, right? And
Yes.
that era of exploitative economics, which is what Yanis Varoufakis is speaking to, why
Yep.
it conflicts with democracy,
Yep.
is the whole notion at the heart of capitalism. Capitalism is the last version of exploitative economics and the most efficient version of exploitative economics. Okay, the nations that have been exploited by capitalism, right, are uniting on one side of the world, and they are exposing the fact that even by the rules of capitalism, the way the United States is gathering wealth is through force. It's not through competition. It's not through adding
Absolutely.
value.
That
It's
last
through
part is absolutely true.
and
So
that's what's happened.
here's a big piece of the puzzle, okay? That I was really thankful for the filmmakers of In the Eye of the Storm for pointing out because of the interview with Giannis. It didn't occur to me that when FDR did the original Bretton Woods conference after the fall or World War II, there were no bankers
No
there.
bankers. No
So
bankers.
people, that's the key consideration because
That's
look,
right.
I hate. So remember, I said to you before, integrity is the most important thing to me because
Yeah.
if your actions aren't in alignment with your ideology, then you're in disarray. That's intelligence on the betrayal side that's led to this bullshit, that's led to this tyranny that is in control of not just the United States, even though we're the number one evil bastard at doing it at the moment, post what I said, 2009, when 33 trillion at that stage, 33 trillion was illegally given to the guys that blew up millions of people. Now, I want to say this to all of you people that are justifiably outraged, disgusted, horrified with all of the elements that take place in Gaza. Okay, particularly with the 30,000 plus dead and the 13,000 children and however many women. This kind of stuff to me is just I don't even know how to address this in my mind. My mind wants to explode when I start thinking about this, but I need everybody to understand. Since 2009, we've had a version of collateral damage that has just destroyed a huge population, a percentage of population in the United States. Did it drop bombs and make it impossible for people to get food because of all of the things we're seeing in Israel? No, different. What it did, and this goes to what you need to wrap your heads around America. Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, first and foremost, didn't have all of the resources that the Department of Justice did that could have easily brought a lot of cases against Donald Trump's malfeasance in a much broader contextual way that stopped short with the AG's office because from where I'm sitting, given what I'm telling you, was a PR stunt, okay? Because the PR stunt isn't that Trump isn't guilty and that all of the things they said, but it was only one part of the story, probably 50% of the story. The other part of the story are why do banks loan to anyone, especially like Trump, under those circumstances, if you're not doing the due diligence that would lead you to understand his appraisal fraud when you provided the loans to begin with? Is there a whodunit? Why would that happen? And so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Alex Wagner the other day discussed at length that made me want to throw up was this sort of like gleeful pom-pom routine of like elevating Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as the one who dominated this whole thing because she understood appraisal fraud and asked the question of Michael Cohen in this hearing, way back in. What does this have to do with everything that we're talking about? Look, there are laws in this country, okay, as demonstrated by the $500 million plus that Donald Trump now has to pay. Okay, so I think many of you, particularly the blue no matter who, and those that are going to go for Biden based on this horrific sort of idea of a Trump and fascism and blah blah blah, you know, yes, except you've got to understand that everything that we're seeing is a tiny, tiny, maybe thumbprint or toenail. What are we talking? Why can I think of the meme? It's like just a small version of what I've in Kevin and what our collective work reveals, which is that the entirety of the financial financialization of home ownership through this incredible assembly line of fraud, where we ended up setting up tens of millions of people in the exact same appraisal fraud mechanism to do what we call a rolling loan knows no loss, because you can refinance, you can refinance, you can refinance. There's a lot of things that were going on with that at the time, but ultimately it was based on racketeering because the entire system was lying about the appraisal values that justified what the homes were worth so that you could loan against them, that actually had tens of millions of people involved with it. And so what happened when the 2008 great financial crisis collapsed, we had people that lost their houses, lost their family to this collateral damage through domestic, divorces and suicides, and people that wound up on the streets. We see them all over the United States. Many of them came from this situation and continue to because of the nature of how much money it is to buy or rent a place that actually has probably 80% inventory. That's another part of this whole trick that's going on, because the whole thing is guaranteed by these mechanisms that I'm revealing to you that come from nonstop finance into the system at very low rates. I mean, we kicked up the interest rates over the course of the last year and a half, which blew up a whole bunch of banks because of this stuff, but that's another side of the story. But at the same time, we used illegal documentation fraud in millions of cases in courts that judges knew exactly what was going on over the course of the 13 years, that people were getting kicked out of houses that the people that were the foreclosing parties didn't have a right to foreclose on them. But the judges didn't care. Why? Because anybody who doesn't have a lot of wealth to be able to protect themselves are expendable in our system. And so what happened? We basically bulldozed them into the streets, destroyed their lives, destroyed a whole generation that is ultimately in this chaos that we're in the midst of. And so everybody is pointing fingers at everybody else and starting world wars and things that are leading to absolute devastation that continue to go beyond what any of us could probably imagine 20 years ago. I know I couldn't imagine what's happening in Gaza today. There's no way in hell I could have ever thought this was a possibility, but there it is, right in front of our eyes. And it feels to me, this is what happens when society collapses, when you live in a failed state, when you live in a dystopia where I think most of us think that there's some sort of value, right? From your work, from your mental capacity, from that you've saved in, that which gives us, some sort of stability and all of these other things, but it can be ripped away from you in a second. And so what I would ask everybody who has endured whatever 2 hours this is, and hopefully you've been on the edge of your seat the whole time, and you probably wanted to say as much and criticize me or have something to say to Kevin, because these are complicated freaking discussions that really ring a lot of emotional bells. What you've got to understand is the United States government, in its pursuit of what we're saying with Trump right now in terms of all of these ideological high, I'll call it hyperbole, but in terms of like this principled ethos that we're protecting, democracy, that we're protecting free markets, you have to live underwater or in a cave or somewhere in the netherworlds to believe that any of that's true. It's all a lie. What we're telling you is it's all a lie. So I suppose in my closing comment, and I don't know if I'm making the best points that I'd wanted to, but if you're horrified by the war in Gaza and the genocide, and you're horrified by those things that American power is enabling, either through, and you justifiably said earlier, because you caught yourself, is it our tax dollars? No, it's some sort of variation of this funding mechanism that would enable the military contractors to put all of these things in play. Could you imagine how much it is to fund a carrier group? I mean, those are cities. I mean,
Billions.
and how many do we have? We have at least 13 new ones, I think. I mean, I know that we've cut down on the military with Navy with smaller ships, but we've increased the size of the carrier groups, which makes us more easy to go get all around the world, right? But the amount of money with the 687 bases, with all of our fingers all over the world to export what? To export democracy? To export free markets? What we're telling you is this doesn't exist at home. This is brutal tyranny by it's seemingly faceless, but it's not faceless. They're in front of our face every single day. You want to know who one of the top guys is? He's in front of our face every day that the mainstream media acts like he's sort of the godfather of Wall Street. Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon is one of the ultimate lions around the campsite that has gotten away with at least 5, count them, 5 major criminal convictions in the last, I think it goes back to 2014. And every time they get nailed and nicked and he doesn't have to admit, all of the causation or the criminal activity that he was involved with, stock of Chase goes up, of which I think he just sold like $150 million worth yesterday. This is how cocooned and rigged the whole system is. And what happens in the end? What's going to happen when the next collapse of the economy happens, which is, I think, right in front of us, because everybody that I listen to keeps giving us information from the street and everywhere from the top to the bottom and back again, that this is all just a giant bubble once again. Everything that's happened with the interest rate cuts a couple of weeks ago, what we're seeing is just, there's 7 companies that basically fuel the entire stock market. What? If that's not another sort of reflection or just proof that nothing makes sense anymore. 7 companies are important for the global economy. 7? There's how many billions of people on the earth? 8 billion? Something like that. There's 7 companies that have absolute control. Most of them are in tech. It used to be all the oil companies, by the way. Now it's pretty much tech that's in control, right? Okay. So where do I end with this? Where is my off ramp? Look, we're in disarray. We're a failing state. We're in a downward spiral to hell. We've been living in hell for a long time. The only way we can reach up from the ashes and be redeemed is if you are equipped with the truth of how power works and why we have to create a clean new deal. And I'll let you hopefully close this in a way that maybe I didn't miss any points and hopefully I didn't make any mistakes.
No, you did great, Patrick, as always. But yeah, how I would like to close is remind folks that
Thank you.
the way the con works is they always give you a story. And the con works in terms of getting you to give up something that you wouldn't otherwise give up because you believe the story. Right. Look at the narratives that we've been told. We're at a point where, in order to believe the narratives we've been told, we have to look at what's going on in Gaza and say, we have to look at what's going on in Gaza and say that this is Israel's right to defend himself, and therefore it's justifiable, right? When genocide has no defense. Just go read the Genocide Convention. It's a page that has the definition. Okay. So I want to end my comments, by reiterating why most Americans haven't gotten your message, Patrick, right? Is because the powers that be are smothering your message. And no matter what Aaron Bushnell's courageous act demonstrates, those same powers that be are trying to smother his message. And so I'm going to repeat the message that was removed off Facebook, because it shows you what's left of our First Amendment and freedom of speech. So Aaron, in his last message on Facebook, said, "What would I do if I was alive?" He said, "Many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery, or the Jim Crow South, or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide?" The answer is, you're doing it right now. Okay. There's nothing in that comment that I would think that a freedom of speech would not protect. But that is not allowed to be said on Facebook.
And nor was it trending on X this morning, to
Yeah.
my knowledge.
Well, so okay, right. The powers that be
I
are
could be wrong.
blocking. The
I'll
powers
look at it
that
right
be,
now while you're talking.
the powers that be are blocking that message. But then he recorded a video in front of the Israeli um, embassy in Washington D.C. and he said, "My name is Aaron Bushnell. I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide," he said. "I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest. But compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided is normal." Yeah, this is what our ruling class have decided is normal. We have to reclaim our sovereignty. And the first step in reclaiming our sovereignty and building the America that we thought we had grown up in is to set aside the narratives that they tell us, challenge the narratives that they tell us, find the truth. A great amount of work has been done by Patrick in order to give you bulletproof truth for how you've been robbed and how I've been robbed and how he's been robbed for the last 50 years and moving forward. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, that have been robbed from us. So you have to educate yourself from the truth, but it won't happen as long as you are listening to any of the establishment media. It really doesn't matter whether it's Fox or it's MSNBC or CNN or the Wall Street Journal or New York Times or the Washington Post. By the way, all of those people covered the fact that Aaron Bushnell lit himself on fire. And none of them mentioned in their headlines that it was because of Gaza. Think about the coordination. They didn't mention in the headlines why he did it.
By the way,
Because
I
they
think
don't
I
want you
think
to
the
know.
CIA has an outsized influence there as well, and has for some time. And I just looked, and Aaron's not trending on X, so there you go there. But let's see. Look, I wanted to just add one last thing there, right? So again, I don't know if I made this point as clearly as I wanted to about this sort of celebration of what um, Letitia James was able to achieve in the Trump uh, uh, civil fraud trial that Judge Engoron obviously um, made the final sort of decisions based on how much money was going to be um, fined against the Trump enterprise, right? Or Trump industry or whatever, just Trump businesses. Again, I want to remind people that there were tens of millions of what we call liars loans that blew up the United States. But you might want to think of it as, I hate to use this analogy, but cheese on a rat trap to catch everybody because nobody knew what the hell was going on. Those are people who lived in their houses for a very long time that refinance, believing the stuff that they were being told at the broker's tables. Okay, that's one thing. But it was literally liars loans that were creating these hyper inflated appraisals that justified the entire sequence of events that we show you in the con at www.thecon.tv. All of those liars loans included documentation fabrication that, basically made up all sorts of numbers, including copied and pasted. I mean, elementary level fraud that anybody who investigated this stuff could have discovered like that. In fact, many did, which then we show you on the con. And yet an entire multi-trillion dollar, I think we're up to $600 trillion derivatives market spawned from this $4.5 trillion industry, of which 80% of it was predicated on these liars loans. Now, here's the thing in the aftermath. Because of the nature and the magnitude of the way these systems are supposed to work versus it became an absolute mess. And I think that was all by design, that nobody could keep up with the paperwork. Nobody could keep up with the real notes and deeds and everything else that tracked what the real estate was based on the derivatives and who owned what, that was owed what, that in a court of law could come and do foreclosures. It was such a massive, think about it as a ship that went down, and there's so much blood in the water, and all of these sharks just came and just devoured everybody. That's what actually happened. But they used it on illegal documentation fraud that people within the courts, what we call foreclosure mills, their attorneys, predicated on being hired by a group of operations that manage the whole thing called servicers that used illegal documentation to steal houses where people were living that they didn't own because they were paid trillions of dollars to do it. So the betrayal that you're seeing in everywhere, you've got to understand it's real. It has a face. It's not, when we talk about the truth, it's not ethereal. We know who did what, when, and how, and what they got away with. And unless you, me, and everybody you see, I hate to say it in this capacity, given everything we've said, who isn't a Nazi, who believes in liberty and dignity and decency and sustainability and credibility, if we merge in unity, we can defeat the misery of tyranny, and we call that the clean New Deal. And we're running out of time. There is no other choice, because as Yanis Varoufakis said in his film, we either figure this out now or we die.
That's where we are. Great way to end it, Patrick. This was fantastic. Thanks so much.
Hey man, I appreciate challenges and in what we did. We're going to post this as soon as possible, and we'll let the chips fall where they may, my man.
Appreciate it. You take
I
care.
appreciate you, Kevin. All the best.